That sounds very official. And it's not gonna let me do the YouTube, so
I got it in higher quality. Oh, is that gonna let you do the YouTube?
it can, but we got it recorded, so we'll just roll. We waited already, so that's fine. We'll make do with what we've got here.
All right.
I think we're ready to
Do I have
go.
to call this meeting to order and everything?
Yep.
Okay. So I call this meeting to order to review the budget of the fiscal year 2023 to 2024.
Yep.
And discuss any changes that have been made in a amendment to the paper copies that we got.
Good.
So I think if we want to just start on page 123, we'll just work our way through the book. And then just discuss department by department if there's any changes or anything, any other topics we want to bring up to make changes to. So we'll start with administration. Anyone have anything on administration that they want to change or discuss?
Would you give us an administration or a line number?
The department number is 0201, page 135. Well, I guess the budget starts on 137, but
Okay.
is there anything within the administration department that we want to talk about? Or is everyone comfortable with that budget?
So I would like to see the breakdown in wages. I know, we discussed this in one of the meetings that it's all lumped in as total administrative department wages. And this applies to all the budgets. I think in full transparency, it would be important to have that broken down.
Yeah, I think maybe for next year, that's definitely been one of the bigger topics. I know it's probably a pain.
Yeah.
But, and I know, John, you had a couple reasons for not breaking it down. But
It's easy enough to do for next year. I think we can easily try to find some way to meet both needs, and be able to have a more of a fully throated conversation about who's in these departments and what they're doing and the like.
Yeah, I don't think it's very transparent. I know we talked a lot about tenure and some of us have more tenure than others within the budgets. But then I don't see a breakdown for people who have more tenure versus people who have less. So to me, I'm not comfortable with it as just a line item. And if we're, talking about whether it's going to be this year or next year, I would really like to see what % of the total budget is going to the salary and wages in comparison to the other towns that we were looking at to help us really gauge an understanding of if it's, a fair amount or not.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that is included in the salary survey also, which it is tough, obviously, to reference back and forth to that,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of good information in there.
Yeah, I think it's almost unrealistic to reference back and forth, right? Really.
For the salary study, one thing to keep in mind going forward, I saw that we adjusted sometimes up to the extent we had more years of service than a counterpart in another town.
Yeah.
But we didn't do that consistently across the board. And we also didn't adjust down. And I think that a better frame of reference might not, I mean, John, you have a year and a half service. Obviously, you've been the town's manager much longer than that. So if we use those as benchmarks going forward, we ought to ask more pointed questions like how many years of service overall do people have? I just think that'll give us a much better kind of yardstick to measure whether we're.
That's a good point, Greg. Yeah. I I hope I don't have to do this anytime soon again, but I think you're right. That's to try to get to that number. Inevitably, we're gonna have to do this again at some point, but no, you're right. That
Yeah, and if you're talking for future iterations, and some of us may not be here, right? Again, I think that percent of the budget is very helpful to look at for your committee members, as I think about things like where the budget is going. It's good to know, like we look at what percent of the budget is going to schools, et cetera.
Mhm.
I think it would be very important for each one of these, each department, and overall, to know how much of the budget of the town is going to salaries and wages.
And while I think that that's valid for within the town, I'm not sure what you get by asking other towns what their percentage of wages are, because they may have a large capital expense that year, or all kinds of different things. So I think it's valuable within the town to say, hey, 42% of our budget is salaries and benefits. But to know that, 21% of another town's the 21% of their budget is our wages. It doesn't make any sense because we have no idea what's going on there.
I'm curious if I'm the only one. I am all for people getting raises. I'm all for cost of living. But the raises are large percentages. Have we considered just maybe taking 1% or 2% off of them to cut down on the overall effect? Or if I'm the only one that feels this way, I'm sorry, but I'm just curious.
No, I don't think you are, Janet. I think that's why we're having the conversation, right? So, we know we've got a limited budget. We had a limited budget last year. We have a limited budget this year, and that's, just the way it's going to be, right? But I agree with you as I think about, look, I think raises are great and everybody's worthy of a raise, but they are significant raises, and there's very little in the budget for, things within the town that I think are needed. So I agree with you. It's a difficult call because you never want to say to somebody, oh, don't give them a raise, right? But there's significant percentages
I mean,
in comparison to what we need across the town.
if I was getting a 25% increase, I'd be thrilled.
Right.
But not everybody out there in the town of Rockport gets the full 8% cost of living increase in their salary. And I believe that if we just cut a couple percent across the board, that it'll make a difference in the budget, but I don't think it makes, I can't believe it makes us totally uncompetitive by cutting a couple percent off of salaries.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to end up being a difficult call, and that's kind of what we effectively, not wholly, but possibly lost a couple of employees to last year because of that. And as one of them said, you're effectively trying to balance the budget on the backs of the town employees, which isn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily capture it all like that, but it does bring up a good point, as everyone knows. So I don't know, is also the way to think about this is we're giving raises to these people in particular. I think we're giving these raises to the positions, and the positions are absorbing the raise, because if the people in those positions left, we need to be able to replace them with that salary at that level.
Right.
So the whole point of the survey was to try and get us to a point where we kind of hit reset, I guess, which is going to be a big hit. And personally, I'd rather just take the one hit in a year, and I would rather see our current employees' salary go up to wherever they should be, or down to wherever they should be, before we hire any new employees.
I think-
Janet, were you talking about 2% off the cost of living increase, or the 2% off those raises, which were more than the cost of living.
2% off the cost of living.
The cost of living, that,
Or I don't care where it
I-
comes from. I really don't. To me, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that if someone is getting a 27.9% increase in their salary, if they only got 25, it's still a big increase. And the salary survey was picking an average of a bunch of towns. So I can't believe that that 2% would totally skew us completely out of the average. And I want them to be paid a fair wage. But we pick these numbers off of an average, and it is up to interpretation.
well, I know
That's
a
all
few
I'm
years
saying.
ago, yeah, a few years ago, we did do another salary survey and bumped a whole bunch of salaries up in various positions. I'm sort of wondering, how did we suddenly fall so far below again after
think-
just 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I think we did last year, right? I mean, this is only my second year, and I thought last year we had a lot of conversation about salaries as well. And I feel like we had a very similar conversation at the beginning of last year where John made a very good case to raise salaries so that we could retain people. Whether or not we all agreed with that, it was approved. And it seems like we're having the same conversation again. And maybe there's a way to step, if we truly feel that, a 25% or whatever the case may be, raise is warranted, maybe there's a way to step into it. I mean, I certainly, those raises that's significant. It's a significant increase in someone's salary.
No, the raises I'm talking about were at least 3 or 4 years ago. John, do you remember when the last survey was done?
Yeah, so there were adjustments before I arrived that Bill had undertaken. He did his own survey. Where he adjusted a handful of positions that were out of range. This is sort of the pre-COVID market. So that was in part what happened. The other issue with that survey is that it from those who are in the know, the sense is it wasn't very comprehensive. So it wasn't going stem to stern of every department, every position. Certainly didn't have the breadth of this, reaching out to 22 towns and so forth. So it was an attempt to try to get there. And then of course the COVID market happened and everything since then has been kind of bananas. A couple different factors into that, obviously, labor shortage, sure. The other part that I would mention is the fact that a number of municipalities and counties were using ARPA funds through the COVID period as a way to support the salaries of their employees. So when the county, for example, went through that process, those funds dried up this year and they had to include real wages for their employees in the budget for this coming year, which is why their budget to us was up 16%. So this budget's at 7.6%, I think, as the board's presented it. And I certainly understand the concern. There is a distinction from last year's budget to this year's budget. So last year's budget was simply a handful of positions that needed to be addressed immediately because we either had openings or there were new positions and they had to adjust them. But my frustration in that was that we would create positions that would be funded what I expected to be where market was. And actually the survey seemed to bear that out, but everyone else would be left behind. And so that's part of the difficulty in tweaking or making adjustments. While we can, say here tonight that there's subjectivity to it, it's a subjective measure that went through all across all classes of departments. It went into the union wages, the union police union wages, it went into the public works union wages. And now these are the non-contract wages, non-union contract wages. So if we adjust these wages and not the union wages, now we're going to have even greater issues of class. So I would urge the budget committee to be careful and tread lightly on that world. Because if after, when we start to do that, what happens is those in non-unions start to say, well, gee, I would be protected if I was in a union and I would have had my contract, locked in. And while I'm all for people organizing and having their say, I don't believe it's a good idea for the town of Rockport to have more unions to have to negotiate with. So I'm not suggesting this is a perfect these are perfect numbers, and I hear what you're saying, Janet. These are big numbers, but I think there is some effort that shows why they are there, and I also think we have to be careful to make these adjustments and these tweaks at this point.
So I might make a suggestion that we all know these are big numbers. And as we go throughout the rest of the budget, with it in mind that we want to compensate our people and get them up to market, we should look at other line items that we can maybe wait a year for, so that we can take care of our people. But it is a big jump all in 1 year. And then there's a lot of other things we want to add in this budget. So that we can preserve those increases, I think we probably do need to look where we can tighten our belt elsewhere.
There's a lot of things you want to add to the budget. Are those already mentioned in this document, or is this above and beyond this document?
Who is that question to,
Yeah.
Jeff?
No, it's to Greg.
I'm sorry, there's stuff we want to add.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether you're saying that today you'll be adding stuff to the budget or whether you just go back through
No,
it.
no, I thought this group, I think we all are saying the same thing, that there's a big wage increase and maybe it's something that we need to do. But as we go through the rest of the budget, are there areas that we can maybe pull something out and it can wait a year?
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and I would just go back to Janet's point about, I would again ask to consider, I hear what you're saying, John, and we don't want to create wage disparity and, whether you're creating a situation for unions or not, it's probably a different topic. I would ask again to consider a small decrease of 1 to 2% and spreading that over the budget, because when we are in a situation like we are, and it's tough, we want to pay people fairly, but we also need to make sure that we have the town in a way that it should be. And I, again, would argue or go back to and really ask to have documented and taken into consideration a slight reduction in the wage increases and have that spread.
Yeah, I think maybe going forward, I don't know if we're concerned about any positions in particular, or if we are just concerned about a blanket raise, basically. I mean, are we looking at just a cost of living increase that we want to reduce, or are we looking at a couple of different positions that are getting a raise that maybe shouldn't get quite as big of a raise?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, maybe that needs to be done a little bit further as well. But I thought that, there's an increase here to bring people to where the board thinks that they should be paid. And then there's a cost of living increase that is separate over and above what is being asked for to bring people up to par, correct?
That's right. There's two parts to it. There is the
Yeah.
adjustment, which would bring them to what market was set as of July 1st, 2022. And then there's a cost of living, which takes that adjusted that number that's accurate as of July 2022 and moves it into where it would be as of July 1st, 2023, when this budget starts.
Right. And then it's a percentage of a higher figure to start with. So I would look at, I would advocate for, I think the COLA adjustment might be a separate conversation. I would advocate for looking at the increases that are being applied prior to the COLA.
So one other maybe place to get some clarity, the study, the budget, the salary survey was dated November 1, 2022. So are we really talking about a full year of cost of living adjustments if that was market as of November 1?
Well, what That's the hard part about using social security, because the social security number is it lags, right? So that's looking at October to October, but we're not putting those increases in until July 1st. So we're sort of acknowledging we're already behind when we use the social security number. And then conversely, we're also, by the time the budget goes in, it's like another 9 months before you're putting it into effect. So it's an old number by the time we actually put it to use, I guess is my point. And if we had deflation, then I would be, I think I would be more inclined to say, well, geez, maybe that's too high, or maybe there's something going on. We're not really in that market right now. Seems as though though inflation's continuing, it's not at the same pace. Things are still increasing in cost.
Yeah, so I think going forward, maybe the best plan, I guess, just to continue progress here is to just understand that maybe we do want, whenever the select board meets again, just to take a look at the cost of living increase and determine if they feel comfortable with it or not. And then as we go through the budget, to actually look at position by position if there are any of those raises that were from the salary survey that we want to reduce.
Okay.
I think that's maybe a fair assessment so that we can continue.
Yeah, I think Greg's point on looking at the individual salaries was looking at the tenure, right? So looking at the tenure to see if we want to move some up or down.
So, yeah.
Well, in reading it, I really couldn't tell. I mean, it seemed like years in that position, but it didn't, like I use John, for example, you're not 1.5 years as a town manager, so I don't know exactly how we make adjustments apple to apple there. It seems a little difficult, but
It's not, yeah. I'm an outlier in a lot of ways, Greg, so that's good and bad, so.
I mean, some of this too, I think I fear we start down a path of no good answer, and it's going to be subjective year to year anyways. And it's kind of, I guess, how I'm thinking about it in my head is, last year we had a massive jump on our roads, paving and construction of our roads. And that was basically just it was certainly not an arrow at a dartboard, but it was like, hey, let's go with this number because this has some science behind it and some calculations that we can use and something to base it off. And we'll just adjust it down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these salaries are going to be fluctuating, basically, maybe not fluctuating, but continuously changing year over year. Right. So I think having this reset at this point is a good way to bring us to where we are, and maybe I don't know, just kind of take it with a grain of salt this year and look at it next year as well.
If I could interject, in all my years on the budget committee, and I'm going on 10 or 12, I'm not sure, I've never looked at the salaries. We pay our employees because they are valuable to this town and they deserve what they're getting. So to me, I don't even look at those lines. That's what we pay to have good, solid employees working for the town. And it seems to me to be just a waste to sit here and talk about the issue. I would rather go through each department, see if anybody wants to add or subtract something. We know the select board made 3 or 4 changes, fire department, the harbor, and the library. And if there's nothing else, then let's approve or disapprove their changes and get this meeting over with.
Yeah, I mean, the point of it is also to go through and give everyone the opportunity to speak to every department's budget. We somewhat did that as they were presenting their budgets, but that's the premise of this whole meeting, is to go basically department by department and verify that we are all on board or not on board with it, not just review their changes.
Well,
And
that's
Helen,
what I'm saying. Just go through, yes, department by department. If we've got changes, fine. But to sit here and spend half an hour discussing salaries, it's a waste of time as far as I'm concerned.
But also the point of this is to get everyone's opinion, which is why we include everyone on the budget committee.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're all comfortable, right? And we're able to speak our minds. I think this is our time to ask our questions and understand. So completely understand. We want to kind of be able to move things on, but I think it's important. It's debating is important. It's part of the process, part of government, and part of our responsibility as we make these decisions.
Hey,
and
John, I
Helen,
have-
I think we all agree that we want to compensate and take care of our employees, and they're our best asset. I think in a year when we are putting a large portion of our funds towards that, my point is we ought to be, if there's an extra dump truck we don't need, or something else that we can lighten the load on the taxpayers. I just think if that's what we're spending this year, like Clint said, last year, we put a lot into our roads. Maybe that number can come down a little this year.
Well, I think the budget has already done that. I think that John and his crew have recognized that this is the year for pay equity, given the surrounding towns and cities, and that he's pulled back on stuff. We have the option of asking to tweak it even more, but I think that recognition is there. Clay, a quick question for you. Is this a meeting where we want to come out of the meeting with motions and votes to go section by section, or is this just a conversational piece and with notes taken on what we'd like to change?
I think essentially this meeting is designed so that we can provide the select board with the budget committee's various opinions, to have them take those into consideration. With their initial review of the budget the other night, they weren't necessarily taking into account the budget committee's specific opinions or thoughts or questions even. So I think the point of this meeting is not necessarily to have, I think we can have motions to have them specifically change values on some of these line items, but I think it's also to equip them with some info or opinions of maybe how we're feeling as a committee, which is somewhat how the town feels. I guess a
Megan.
representation of how the town feels.
I could be wrong, but it looks like April 3rd and 4th are when we actually vote.
Right.
So
That's when the
coming out of-
budget's finalized. I do think as like a whole, and Carrie and I ran through this today before we sent you the LD1 stuff. As the budget stands now and our estimated growth, if the board goes along with the statistical update, even though about a third of people's values will increase, we'll still be able to reduce the mill rate as the budget is now.
Yeah, I mean, some of that is also because property values went up so much.
that's all of it.
I mean, my taxes aren't going down, so I know the mill rate's going down, but no one.
Some will. Some will.
Wow, right,
That's that
right.
third thing that he was talking about, where
Right.
third go up, third go down, third stay the same. So
I
mean,
did have a
none
question
of us wanna
on
be in the third
on the
go up.
LD1.
Okay, I just want to finish up with Clay just for a quick second here. Clay, do you propose letting the select board know about the varied opinions of the budget committee? Do you propose that is a narrative and notes that John might be taking, or do you want to indicate the opinion of the board via a vote that says, 4 people say yay and 3 people say nay type of thing? How do you want to get the message to the select board?
I think we'll be putting together a letter. If I recall, that's what Jeff did last year to the board. To look at, I guess, what we have for findings or opinions for the budget committee. So I don't know if that'll be, I guess that'll be something that I'll put together to get to them. So they can review it for their next meeting, whenever that is.
So in
I
the
don't know if we
past,
necessarily need to take a vote on the opinions. We certainly can, if that's a consensus, if that's what we think will send the message.
If I could, I think it would be helpful. If you know, I think that there may be items that there's consensus with among the group, and I think that that's, you know, a good idea. The challenge is, of course, is that you know, if it's 8-1, then that sends a message. If it's 5-4, that sends a message as well. And I think it might be helpful, particularly if we get to some of these issues where, you know, various members may go in different ways. It may be helpful just to narrow this down, because as Megan said, the idea really on the 3rd is to take, you know, let's say you have, like last year you had 4, let's say you have 6 recommendations, or maybe there's 16 recommendations. The idea on April 3rd is for the board to then go through those 16 items and say, okay, would we agree with this? Do we disagree with that? Or we want to go some other way, you know, but listens to what the committee said. That's really what the 3rd's for. Then the 4th is for you to sort of, if you need a chance to sort of rebut or to respond in some way. But that's pretty much like it right there. Is the 3rd, is when they say this is what the budget's going to be. So this is really the best chance for the budget committee to speak with one voice. We think, you know, we should do X. So I think as clear as you can make that, and sometimes that's why votes help. That's probably a good way to go. But if you can write that letter, it's you know, it's just how do you capture when there's disagreement, or
Sure.
that can be hard. I don't know.
So I guess if we're gonna try to get a little more black and white with what we're all talking about, there's essentially gonna be 2 parts to what we're talking about. We're gonna take a vote on the cost of living increase, and if that is adequate, or if that needs to be adjusted, and then the other, I guess, opinion or whatnot will come from, or the other vote will come maybe through the department by department wage adjustments. I don't think we're necessarily going to be voting on one overall wage increase or decrease outside of cost of living.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll make a motion to take a vote on who, I don't know what the best way to phrase it is, who would like to see the cost of living increase adjusted, or who would like to see the cost of living increase stay the same.
Did you
So,
want to take a vote then? So the way to do that, according to Robert's rules, first you have to have a second for your motion, which I will do.
Okay?
And then you have to call the question, and it would be phrased, do you want to leave the cost of living raise as it is, 8%? And you call for a vote, yes or no. And that's the only question you'd need to ask.
Okay. So we've got a motion and a second. So the question will be, do you want to see the cost of living increase or adjustment changed?
You should probably
Oh.
call the roll on that,
Okay.
which is for Zoom meetings, you call the roll.
I guess what do you mean by call the roll?
Call
Go
each person by
individually.
name and ask them how they want to vote.
Okay, we'll do that. Helen, how do you
No.
vote?
Just as some background, power's been going on and off, so.
Yeah,
I'm out.
I was out for about 3 minutes. So.
Yeah, it
I'm
looks
back.
like Diana, who's just down the street from me, isn't here. I have power, but she may not.
yeah. It looks like a lot of us kind of blinked there a minute ago, so maybe we adjust, we ask this question later on when we're all back on.
Or you can do it now and it's kind of weird, but you could then add to that tally when they come back on.
Right.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm a little out of loop. So just to recap, cost of living based on wages, 8.8%, correct?
Oh, she's back.
Is that yes?
8.7.
Yeah, 8.6.
Okay,
Sorry.
8.7. Okay, so what is the national average, or let's just say main average?
The 8.7 was the social security cost of living.
Oh, you do it
adjustment.
based on social securities, and John did mention that
Yeah.
based on town raises, you guys are typically behind what, 18 months,
Roughly.
right? Roughly?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. That makes sense to me. Okay, thanks. That gives me some perspective. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Looks like Diana's back. Welcome back, Diana.
Thank you.
Did you get an extension cord from Greg's house or is that?
Yeah, I was gonna go over to borrow a glass of wine on that intermission. but-
so I think Diana, what we've got a motion to vote on if we should decrease or if we should change the cost of living adjustment. And we're gonna take a vote and see, I guess, so that we can have a definitive black and white answer on how the budget committee feels to be able to present the select board with those numbers and
Okay.
the opinions, I guess.
Okay, and I'm sorry to make anyone repeat, because I know I was having trouble getting back in. Did the group feel that's cleaner than saying, I don't know, take a 1% off the raises? They feel it's cleaner to take a 1% off the COLA or something to that effect? that-
We didn't have anyone that actually necessarily gave
Okay.
a specific value.
Yeah, but also in the last 20 minutes, some people have looked at COLA and some people have looked at pre-COLA increases as to where to take that money. In one sense, it's kind of six of one, half does the other. In another sense, those people like myself who will defend COLA as if you don't give employees COLA raise, you're giving them reduced buying power. So I guess where you take it from is an important consideration. And it also has to do with, if it's levied across the board evenly, it will affect those people with the higher potential rejiggering, alignment to the other wages. It'll affect those people more.
Okay, so how, I guess, is there anyone else that wants to phrase the question, the motion differently so that we can present the select board with a more definitive answer of how some people are in agreement with the cost of living and how some would like to see it changed?
Why not just pose it as two questions? Would you like to keep the COLA the way it is? Yes or no? Would you like to take a percentage off of the raises across the board?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Janet, because
Makes sense.
there are so many different ways to look at it. And Jeff, you raised a good point. And the other side of it, I look at it as well. You're always better off to raise your actual base salary because you keep that and your COLA can go up and down. You know what I mean? So there's always different ways to look at it. So I think that's a good way to pose the question.
Okay, when those two questions are gonna be, would you like to leave the COLA as is? And what, I guess, is there a certain percentage that we would like to incorporate into the next question of, would we like to decrease COLA by X value? So is there any input or opinions on what that percentage would be.
Well, generally, motions are best made when they're as clean. I mean, it's better to make 20 motions and parse out, what it is we're really saying than it is to have a combined motion. So
Yeah.
we do have a motion that's been seconded on the table about changing or not changing COLA. So I think it's appropriate for
Yep.
us to vote on that.
So that will be our first motion. First, clarity is, the first motion is to, if we would like to see, we're gonna take a vote on if we'd like to see COLA changed. Or remain the same, I should say, if we would like to suggest that COLA remains the same. And I believe that is what was seconded.
Yeah.
Second.
So Clay, as the chair, why don't you go around and ask each individual, because on Zoom meetings, we do have to, whoa. Oh, no. Whoa, the power went out. No, it didn't. So if you go around and each of us answers individually to your prompt.
Okay. So let's go down just in order of my Zoom list or whatnot. Janet, how do you vote on that?
I vote it stays the same.
Okay. Jeff,
Stay the same?
Diana,
I'm sorry, I do have to ask a clarifying question. Then are we saying the second motion would be, do you want to, evaluate the salaries? Is that what we're saying?
we can come up with another motion afterwards. I think we maybe work through this one motion of whether or not we want to adjust COLA, and then we can go with a second motion after that.
Okay, all right. Yep, then COLA can stay the same, yes.
Okay. Ben,
Hey, Clay, can you explain what COLA is? Is that the 8% based on 8% wage increase?
yeah, so that'll be the 8.87, right? Cost of
8.7, yep.
living-
Right.
Cost
Yep,
of living
8.7.
adjustment.
Okay, so I would say remain the same, based on that the town employee raises are based on 18 months rolling a calendar year.
Okay,
So no change.
okay.
So that's my
Alan?
basis.
Stay the same.
Okay, Greg,
Yes,
yes to stay the same.
correct.
Okay. And I think that's all we have on, right? Unless Jeff gets a second vote.
You have
no,
to
get the
vote.
vote. You get
That's
the vote.
according-
Clay.
And I vote that it stays the same as well.
Let's see if Jeff votes again and cancels himself out.
I have to go over to the recording deck then to do that.
Okay, so there's that motion, and we all voted unanimously that the cost of living adjustment stays the same. If I heard everyone correctly.
Yep.
Okay, so is there any other motions that anyone else would like to see happen?
So.
I
then, yes.
invite Diana to make a motion.
Thank you, Jeff. So then, yes, I think the motion would be, and you may have to help me with wording this, I know other people's input. But I do think that there needs to be an evaluation of the salaries across the board, or the increase amounts across the board.
I have a question. Isn't that the department head's job to figure that one out?
I think a kind of a mix of department head and town manager.
Okay, so I just don't feel like, okay. Shouldn't we be talking to them instead? I mean, at a higher level? Not look at individual wages? It's based on department, right? Not individuals.
Yeah, it is based on department, and one of the things we were talking about earlier is, and I think we're going back and revisiting it again, but the ability to break down the salaries per department so that we can see what people are actually getting paid. And then I think I don't know if you were on yet, Benjamin, and then we talked about looking at the total percentage increases that people are getting, and is there an opportunity to potentially reduce slightly the overall percentage to reallocate that to other parts of the budget? And that's when we then started having the conversation about the COLA, which is in addition to the increase amount that they would be receiving in their salary as well.
Okay, I understand that. I just hope we don't go down to the weeds of each individual salary, right? Because I feel like it's way too much into the weeds. I would stay at the department head, each department.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion. Otherwise, I feel like because they're the ones who know why and the technical and the basis for the salary increases.
Yeah, I
And they're
mean, a
the
lot of
ones-
this, I think, Ben, was how people felt a reaction to the salary survey and how not only the department heads, but town manager interpreted the salary survey and where the final salaries of each position are. Some of the bigger raises, up towards 27, 28%, I guess, may be what's in question, I think.
Oh, I see. Okay, I didn't get that. All right, thanks for.
Yeah, and I guess I struggle because I don't think there's enough detail in the salary survey, even though there's a ton. So I don't want to say that. It's hard for me to say these are right or wrong. Some of them could be low, and I know that's just the difficulty of trying to get that data. But I think the request was potentially, let's take an extra peek, and if we're comfortable that's where it is, that's where it is.
I'll second the motion so you can at least call the question.
Can everybody see the motion? I edited a little bit to make it a question. So I just want to make sure that you're good with it, Diana.
Yeah, that's you typing, right, Megan?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go back down through. Helen, how do you vote on the motion if you want there to be an evaluation of increases in salaries across the board?
No,
Okay, Janet,
Yes.
Jeff,
No,
Diana,
Yes.
Ben,
So I have a question on this motion though. Is it to evaluate the increase in salaries for each department or individual?
I think it's essentially to look through the salary survey and go position by position to determine that each position is accurate.
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I'm qualified to even vote for that because I would leave it up to the department head.
there are other people in your camp.
So I just don't feel comfortable.
Is Megan frozen?
Yeah, I sure am. So I have my iPad going, which I can't type on, but is using my cell phone data because we've lost power here. So I'm handwriting the votes now.
So you're handwriting and we can ignore or
Okay, so
not be
Ben,
worried.
you'll, is it abstain on that?
Yeah, you
Okay.
know, I'm gonna say no, just because I just don't feel comfortable this is the right thing to do. Unless this motion unless we have another motion to look at each department. I just don't feel, I don't think this is the appropriate way of navigating this. I understand everybody's concern that they might be some outstanding salary, but that's when we bring in and look at each department then individually, and not the individual positions, because each position has a.
Were you saying each position has what?
We might have lost him too.
We did.
Okay, we'll go with his no for now.
Yeah,
I
he
guess.
voted no before he dropped out.
Okay, and Greg,
Yes.
okay. And I'm gonna vote no on that one.
So then your motion fails. It's 4 no, 3 yes.
Okay, so I think moving from this, our next direction is to start actually going through department by department and just looking at the budgets and seeing what we want to change, if anything. And if we come up with any changes as we're going through, I think we'll make motions then to change or amend the budget there per line item. And if there are no changes, then we will not be making any motions. Does everyone feel comfortable with that?
Yes.
Is there anyone who doesn't feel comfortable with that or wants to maybe take it in a different direction?
Just for historical context, this is not the meeting where, whoa. Okay, this is not the meeting where we do our final vote tally that ends up being on the ballot.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I think anything to speed up this evening is fine.
Okay. So let's roll right into admin. Department 201 on page 137. Department specific, do we have any questions about the administration budget?
No.
Bueller. Okay. Anyone want a sec to get caught up and find the page before we move on? All right,
Good, thank you.
let's roll right into town manager. Page
Page
141. Do we
And
want
as
to,
as we go, if we can just point out what changes, if any, were made last time the select board, because it's tiny on the screen and I'm staring at my old budget.
The first changes that were made in the fire department budget. So we've got
Okay.
a little ways to go before there were any.
But to your point though, of like, what did we cut out? So tuition reimbursement, dues and memberships. Let's see, I'm just trying to think of another one that I trimmed back. Travel expenses. Postage, I mean, it's not huge, but we went through this trying to cut small, the things that I could cut that we weren't spending and didn't need to spend.
Could you specify line numbers, please, so we can follow?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. So, and these aren't cuts. So this was like an overall mention, Helen, where I'm talking about, when we talked about were things cut because wages were a priority, right? So for example, the tuition reimbursement, we had 3,000 in that line last year, or this year's budget, I should say. In the budget we're proposing here, which is line 3916, that's a $1,000. So I would cut that by 2,000. Dues and memberships, which is 3820. This existing budget is 1,500. I put in the budget that we're talking about here to $300. So that just, I mean, does it matter? Does it add up to the total? No, but every little bit, trying to find places where I can cut and keep the bottom line as good as we can.
Hey, John.
Yeah, hi, Jeff.
I know that for many years and our cable franchise was
Yep.
kind of iffy each year as to whether we'd actually get that check.
Yep.
And the actual show that we have been, but do we have any contract with them, or is that something that's undocumented at this point?
That's a good question. I believe we did receive the cable. If Megan can, we put in 35 and then I upped it to 36 because historically, we've gotten over 35 every year. My number is the middle number here, and the select board went along with that. And there's every indication we will receive that this year. The status of the contract, I couldn't tell you when the current contract expires.
But you're under the impression that there actually is a contract. to
Yeah,
stay-
yeah,
No,
yeah.
because we went a number of years where we couldn't get them to come up with a contract.
Well, we can't get them to remove their telephone poles either that they should be removing, but yeah. No, I think this is a good number. I think we can rely on 36 again. We hit while people are cord cutting left and right, you know, we seem to be holding with that 36,000 last 2 years.
Thank you.
All right, any other points of discussion on town manager?
Yeah, get rid of them.
Okay. Let's roll into town clerk and tax collector department 207, page 147.
Yep.
Anything we want to talk about with the town clerk?
I didn't have anything here.
I'm good.
Okay. Not hearing much, so we'll move along. Let's go. Planning and Community Development, 209, page 155.
And the select board hasn't altered this at all at this point.
No,
Not until the fire department.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any questions with planning and community development? I guess the only thing I did actually have was just on the furniture and fixtures and mapping. I know that was, we cut that to try and save money, and I think that might be fair. But I do, I guess, just want to make sure that we, just from what Orion was mentioning, if we had to open up an office to try and get some usability in there, I just want to make sure we're budgeting for that. I mean, with new employees, I guess I wasn't sure if that needed here in this department, if that fell into the buildings and grounds or what.
no, I know this is a cut that would impact, you know, in terms of furniture and fixtures. You know, there is a desk that's currently set up in the clerk's office. We're short a computer, we're short some other, you know, details that go with that. You know, if we were going to go down that road and there's support for making changes, yeah, I think furniture and fixtures, probably as you said, in buildings and grounds would be a better fit, because there really isn't any change to the people in this position, in this department. It's
Sure.
more of assessing and finance.
Okay,
So they all have a place to sit, right?
Right.
Okay.
they all have a place to sit and a place to work, and I guess the basic necessities that they need to do their job. Question mark.
We would question mark, right? I mean, I think we would be robbing from Peter to pay Paul to make it work, but it's important that we have the people, and it's important we pay them the wage. And you know, lawn sales, yard sales, we'll figure out a way to make sure that people have what they need at their desk to do their job.
I've got a desk they can have.
Yes. I'll send Glenn over. Glenn and Matt are on their way over, Helen.
Okay. Any other questions on planning and community development? Okay, moving on to finance, 211, page 165. Any questions on finance?
I don't have necessarily the questions, just a commentary follow-up from when we met last. I think this is where we talked a lot about the additional staff for Megan, right? And
Yep.
if we reallocate some of Megan's responsibilities, because we all recognize how important her role is, do we need to revisit that or bring that to the board, or was that already done, or do we need to have any further discussion there?
I'm wondering if
They
maybe that gets brought up in a different department. I don't know. I mean, I like a lot of, seemed like a lot of what we were talking about was with her dealing with the Opera House or with her dealing with McCog. I guess McCog would fall under this, but
Yeah, I think Mark had a lot of questions about that. I know he's not here tonight, but
yeah, I just wonder with as passionate as he was about all that, it doesn't seem to have affected the board at all to date. So maybe it will continue to not affect it, is what I worry about. Especially since how he was one of the big drivers for it, you know.
Hey, John, a quick FYI, I lost the record on that. I'm gonna try and get it back.
Okay. We're still
So I'd just
recording
say-
here.
I don't know, John, or, you
Yeah.
know, if we need to account for that anywhere, or if the, group feels we don't, just putting that back out there to see if anyone wants to do anything with it.
I think it's recognized by them leaving it in the budget.
I'm sorry, Megan, what was that?
I said, I think that it's recognized by them leaving the position in the budget.
Right.
Is the new position in finance or is it in a different budget?
The
It's in the
position,
finance.
In
Yeah.
finance, right? Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other points of discussion in finance that we want to shed a little light on? Okay. Well, maybe move on to assessing 213, page 171.
Do these assessing wages have another person in them? I'm confused on where the extra people are.
so currently there is one position, one assistant position that's shared by assessing and by finance,
Exactly.
right? So basically each department has half a person,
Gotcha.
right? And so instead of half a person, each department would have one whole person.
So each budget picked up a half a person.
Bingo. Right.
Thank you.
You got it.
Gotcha.
I still have a question on line. Oh, gosh, I can't even read it. This type is so small.
Is it somebody can share it on the electronic copy? Is that possible?
3845, the ortho map.
Yep.
That got taken out. The one that Carrie is currently using is 2019, which makes it 4 years old. He says it's not critical, but very useful and needed. So I would like to see some of that put back in.
Is that something where the whole thing has to go back in because it's subscription based and what have you?
Apparently it says, the department head, Carrie, put in tax map, adding annual ortho photo update, and the town manager cut out the ortho photo update. So the update would have been 5,000 apparently, because the manager left in 350.
That's right. That's exactly right, Helen.
So I would like to see that 5,000 put back in.
Is it one of those subscriptions that if you don't renew this year and then you go next year, you have to pay even more because you skipped a year?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. I think Kerry felt as though he had found a really good price for this service. Again, I think he had mentioned when he met with all of you that typically that's a cost that's like 5 or 6 times that amount to get those images. So the ability to do this on more of a, you pay the same amount, but because you have more regular updates, so you'd have more accurate information as you went through. So he it makes great sense in terms of using that service.
John, it
So-
seemed like, and I don't trust me, I don't fully understand it, but when he was explaining it, it seemed like it's a service that
Mhm.
makes his job more efficient, so it, saves us money. So it's one of those areas where if we invest, we get a return.
Mhm.
I'm understanding it correctly.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think he can get a more accurate read of what construction's occurring, where is it happening, when's it happening, because that's the when's it happening part. If you were to miss something, you have an ortho photo that shows exactly what it is at as of a certain date. And the time of year that they fly to do most of these ortho map photographs is right around the time when we're supposed to take that snapshot of what's built. So it actually it sort of does those dual purposes. It's a really good project. And I again, if I wasn't trying to save $5,000, I would include it every day. Yeah.
What's the professional services, John?
Camden,
Oh, the 113. Yes. Yeah, that's the contract with Camden for assessing service, which effectively accounts for the time that Carrie and Caitlin spend in Rockport.
I'll second Helen's motion.
Okay, so the motion to put back the $5,000 for mapping. We'll go through, I'll read through the list again. And we'll just say our votes. So we'll start off with Helen,
Yes,
Janet,
yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Diana,
Sorry, yes.
Ben,
No vote. I don't know enough about it, so no vote.
okay, so abstain on that one or a no?
Abstain. Thank you.
Okay, Greg,
Yes.
okay, and I'm gonna vote no on that one. So it looks like the motion passes. So we will include that in our letter to the select board. All right, moving on. Anything else in assessing?
Okay, so John, where does that money come from? So if we're winning $5,000 back, where are you taking it from?
Taxpayers.
Yeah, it'll increase.
Yeah, I get that.
That's
It all
exactly
comes
right.
from taxpayers.
Yeah, so it would increase the amount that we're raising from taxes.
Okay.
That's and that's why, we're talking about that early on, that issue of salaries versus, some of these items that are valuable. We'll talk about the bathrooms at some point, I'm sure, at the harbor. There's a lot of good programs that I think should be funded. I would fund, make a lot of sense. But in many cases, there are items I felt like that we could avoid a year of, or we could hold off. And it allowed us to deal with one issue before we deal with some of these others. Which isn't to say that they aren't good plans or that I agree with them personally. Like, I agree with this mapping project. But I was just trying to keep the taxes and the impact of taxpayers as low as I could. So that's why some of these cuts made. I mean, it's not because I'm against ortho maps. I'm actually on the other side of that, but just to help you understand the whys behind that.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
Okay. So moving on from assessing, unless there's anything else. Last chance on assessing. So, all right,
Insurance.
insurance, 216, page 177.
The crapshoot of the year. We don't know what what they're gonna come back with.
Any commentary?
Nothing for me.
Done.
Nothing.
Okay, moving on. Public assistance, general assistance, Department 303, page 185.
I'm all good.
I'm good.
Any takers? Okay, moving on to public safety.
Police.
Police Department 401, page 193.
Nothing for me.
I'm good.
Okay. And I think, yeah, I guess the only thing I was wondering about that, I don't know if I think probably look close enough, but putting off the cruiser, is that, how much is that going to affect our replacement schedule down the road? I mean, I know if we put that, are we just putting that one vehicle off now, or is was that whole schedule getting set back a year?
Yeah, the whole schedule gets set back a year. But in the long run, I think that it will actually end up helping because we'll be able to fund the purchase of those cruisers with the reserve fully sooner than what was originally anticipated. So essentially do the same thing here that we do with the fire department. So all new apparatus and lease payments to the fire department are paid strictly from the reserve account. And we're working on getting the police department to that same place and public works.
And we were still putting into the reserve this year, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
The one thing I would say in terms of concerning from Chief Gagney's perspective is are the radar missing the year on the radars. The reason why is that the company who manufactures the radars no longer is making parts for the current radar system we have. So if for some reason, if our radars were to break or something were to occur, we'd have to buy new ones. So we are a bit on the edge on that in terms of all of the
Well, that's what we save our unassigned fund balance for.
well
Emergencies.
we can, but we're not supposed to spend that unless it's in the budget. So but you're right. I mean, those things come up, right? And you have to deal with them. So but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, although radars would of course be nice, I think most of our policemen should be pretty happy with a relatively decent salary increase, right?
They are, absolutely. All things being told, and when we went to the union negotiations, both Public Works and police, they understood that there may be some things they're not going to get this year, but we're dealing with this other issue, and they understood that, and that's part of the give and take of everything. We can't do it all.
Yeah. Okay, anything else with police? Okay, moving on, fire department. Department 403, page 205.
So the big change here this is the first change that the select board made from my budget. Instead of funding two full departments, they decided to make that to one and then hire one 6 months in. So it's 1.5. Oh, thanks. There you go, Megan. So we saved about 50,000 in wages and benefits. So try to stagger the hiring as a way to try to lessen the impact. The other point was just try to continue to do that as we go into the following year. If we were to continue in that phase 2 idea, just to find a way to work towards that and lessen the impact in this year's budget.
And these are both going to be EMTs?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Firefighter 1, firefighter 2, and at least basic EMTs.
Megan, could you send us a PDF of that particular page so we have the changes in the salary and benefits lines? Sitting
Sure.
here and writing them all down is a little fun.
Oh, like to update. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yep,
Yeah, just that one page.
makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
So I was at that meeting and I have some questions about the strategy behind that. There was some comments that, for instance, you could train one of the people one at a time, and then the next person comes in and you do that. Seems to me that training 2 people is way more cost effective than training 1. But the real question is, for 6 months, we would have 1 EMT, where if we had 2, we could go on, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like 12-hour shifts covering 5 days a week, I think is what they had worked out. And to take it down to just 1 EMT, I'm wondering if that's kind of just a wasted 6 months. You know, I guess that's specious because of course you would have, you would at least have more than nothing.
Mhm. Right.
But
Well, there's a couple things that have to happen. So the first thing we have to do is we have to actually hire somebody, which,
as in find somebody.
find one. Let's find one employee that really, or prospective employee that wants to work for the town of Rockport in this brand new, position. Chief has great hopes and believes that he'll be quite successful in that regard. I'm in more of a wait and see mode myself. But we'll have to pursue that. We'll have to pursue obtaining the license from Maine EMS to provide that service. There's record keeping that we would have to, even as a first responder program, there's some rollout of this plan that we need. While we're starting in some respects, a lot of this really can't begin until July 1. So I think that there is, for every day you don't hire someone on July 1, you can hire the second person a day sooner, right? So
Because of your combined budget that you're allowed for that. year.
Yeah. So I think that there may be a place that's closer where there is some overlap, but you're right, Jeff. I mean, is it easier to? It's always easier to train 2 people than 1, and the plan was to be 4 days on, 4 days off with the 2 people. Now, I believe my last conversation with Chief in terms of how it worked with 1 is that they would work largely those weekends, the first person, and there would be some overlap during the week, but it would be more difficult than the other, which is certainly these 2 employees sort of operating the ships in the night and being able to offer that service. But it's a first responder program, so it's not a program where we're transporting to the hospital. So it's a value added to the public, and a value added to the EMS provider who's already going to be transporting. So I don't know that it will be as detrimental for those 2-3 months. Would it be better to have full funding? Sure. But Chief he felt as though that's something he could work with.
All right, thank you.
I don't know, it may be, I don't know if it's biased or inside scoop or whatever, but I feel like maybe the phase 1 as a whole is even a difficult cost justification, because not only do you have the increase in salaries of both people, but you're going to increase with the gear. But we also still, for now, I guess, are planning on kind of making a hole for them in the Rockport station when we don't even, it's not even really air quote built for it
Mhm.
as is.
Right.
And I don't know if it will get us ahead as where we want to be. It's not like we're going to full-time transport service. You know, where Rockport Fire is not going to be showing up with an ambulance with
Right.
this EMT on board.
That's true.
This EMT is showing up as a firefighter with some EMT training. So is the value added to the town worth what we're paying right now? I mean, we got Northeast showing up and we've signed a contract, although it's you know, it's not terribly expensive. We got a halfway decent deal. I should say they're usually showing up. I think maybe I don't know how much support there'd even be, but I almost would forego phase one, save some money this year, maybe drop the unassigned fund balance use, and just plan on diving into a phase two next year and grab a little bit more efficiency with our money spent, because we're spending it going into phase two where we've got what, four new employees. We're training 4 new employees at once. It's also probably not just going to be 4 new employees hired all at once. That the hiring process is going to take a while, which is going to, I think, essentially set our phase in with phase two. And potentially we could have a new station that they're going to go into next year without having to try and waste any money retrofitting whatever facilities we have currently. We can just put them into the new station if that passes. And if that doesn't pass, I don't foresee us even being able to go to a phase two. So if we're not even able to go to a phase two, why even go to a phase one currently?
You've lost me entirely. What do you mean by phase one and phase two?
Were you able to make the meeting? I can't remember who was in attendance that night with the fire department, where Jason was presenting phase one, phase two, and phase three.
I don't remember him. This is the meeting a week or so ago?
This is when the fire department budget was presented.
Right. Yeah, I could barely hear him, so.
Phase
February
one.
27th.
Yeah, so phase one was where they roll out 2 firefighters, firefighter EMTs, excuse me, so that the first step is to bring on 2 people. Oh, convenient picture there also, but yeah, 2 full-time firefighters. So we would have 7-day-a-week coverage. I mean, I'm not sure if he is referring to coverage of firefighters or EMTs or just both essentially, but realistically, I know we still have low numbers, but we've never had a call where one person would have made a difference, you know. If we get to phase two, I think that would make a more drastic difference if we're into phase two.
Say that another way, a more drastic difference if we're into phase two. If we start with phase two, do you mean?
Right. So we just jump over phase one and don't even implement phase one this year. And we just plan essentially to implement phase two next year.
But isn't that kind of, and I don't mean any meanness by wishful thinking, but it's hard enough for us to have the discussion on taking 2 half employees and adding an employee to, you know, in-house relative stuff that we understand. Would it be a harder sell to come slamming into phase two? I appreciate the fact that, you know, the West Rockport Fire Station would be close to being finished and ready for them. And that's a very interesting perspective. But I think the phase one and phase two is an effort to work ourselves up to that level without big shocks, well, huge shocks to the system as opposed to merely big shocks.
Yeah, I mean, some of this too, I almost feel like is a little bit beyond the budget committee's scope of ability. I mean, we're talking a pretty substantial service to the public that we're changing here. You know, the part of phase 2 is such an incorporation of EMTs and an ambulance, I believe. So, I mean, I don't know really the process, but it's almost feels like maybe the public in general should be a little more involved with, is the town willing to bring on such a substantial increase to the town workforce?
Yeah, I think
mean,
baby steps at this point. People are going to see that, and if they think the salary raises that are going in now are off the charts to some people, what are they going to say to phase 2, which I saw, what, 400,000 or something like that? So I think what the select board did in sort of pulling back on phase 1, the 2 EMT firefighters, is a way of stepping through baby steps to get to phase 2
And-
down the
and
road.
I think that showed their support for, creating phase 1. They just wanted to, ameliorate the impact of phase 1 a little bit. But
Sure, but I mean, if we're just essentially drawing less on the unassigned fund balance also, the net cost to the taxpayer is going to be the same as it is currently, So if we save whatever it is, 150,000 on the positions and drop our unassigned fund balance usage by 150, the amount paid by the taxpayer is the exact same whether we use phase 1 or not. And then next year when we jump into phase 2, if I should say, then the hit would still be the same, but you're going from no firefighters to 4 firefighters full time. Well, outside the chief. So you have a net
Right,
effect
and then
you have a net effect of the same cost increase. And you could even soften it with the unassigned fund balance next year. More use of that if you wanted, because we didn't use it this year.
but as you said, we need to get the West Rockport Fire Station built. That's a vote in June, right, John?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So I think as much as I would love to have that many firefighters, given our volunteer loss, yikes. I'd like, I coming at the voters in June with a bond to build the fire station, and then coming at them and suggesting they hire 5 full-time firefighters. I don't think we're going to be able to get the votes to do that.
Well, looking at it the other way around, if we put baby steps modified phase 1 into the budget, and then the budget passes, but the fire station doesn't, John, we don't have to spend that money if we don't have a physical place to put EMT people, right?
That's true. We don't have to spend, we don't have to spend, we'd only spend it if we needed it. Yeah, no, that's true.
And we could even bind it to the next year,
You could,
carry it over.
yep. Yep.
Is that a baby step?
It's a baby. So it's an infant step, maybe. I don't know how that
Yeah.
works, but
Yeah, well,
Clay, I guess I'm hearing that you don't think this is the best plan. I mean, that's probably evolving. Are you and the chief on the same page there?
I mean, he put it in his budget, so again,
well,
some of this I think is also not necessarily to say that the chief wants these 2 guys right now, maybe. And maybe it is to start the very serious conversation of where the town is headed, though. I mean, I do think he probably wants them. And this is my budget committee hat saying, maybe I don't, but my firefighter hat says, well, sure, let's have as many people as we can get. My budget
Well-
committee hat says no.
Clay, you talked about the unfunded, whatever the budget, the
yeah, unassigned fund balance.
Thank you. It's getting late.
Yeah,
Would could you use that fund and bring in both people in July? Would that make sense? But again, I'm still, as somebody said, there's no place to put them at this point. There's
Well-
no station for
Well,
them.
it wouldn't be July, it would be like October, right? Because your fiscal year starts in July.
well,
Well,
again,
it says here you'd hire one in July and then another 6 months later,
yeah.
Yeah,
according to the way.
I'm just a little bit, you talk about difference, I'll put on my, chief. I think chief thinks he can hire someone July 1. I'm a little less optimistic about that, but I think he believes that there's room to house this person to work out of. And when we build, even if the new building is built, it's not like there's an office for every firefighter as well. I mean, there are common areas, there's all these sort of ways in which that structure is going to work. So there's not a lot of room needed necessarily to have someone work out of. They need a locker. So we need to buy 2 lockers, one for each of these employees. But that's not a great issue. I think it's more about the phasing. And to Clay's point, I think the biggest concern is that we need to have this conversation, right? This is a bigger conversation. What I'm saying, at least from my chair, and I'm not the fire chief, so I'm not on every call, I'm not on every accident, feeling that uncertainty of is the ambulance going to get here in time? We're here first because our guys are always there first. Are they going to get here on time? So I'm not feeling that same thing, but as the manager here, I slide in and say, I think that there are concerns about the future viability of the provider we are with. And there's uncertainty as to who would replace them or how they would replace them. And I want to make sure that this group, the budget committee, the select board, are prepared under any circumstances to be able to be prepared for phase 2. That phase 2 is the one where we know that if any of us on this call were in trouble, we know there's a firefighter and a driver who's going to come to your house and pick you up in the town of Rockport. Like, we're preparing for that eventuality. I think the question that sort of, I think Jeff and Helen and Clay are sort of talking about is, how do we get there, right? It could happen tomorrow that our provider goes away and we have to figure this out. It could not happen for 2 more years when our contract ends, or it could be beyond that. So the question is, how do we best prepare ourselves for that? I think Chief's plan was, let's have a little bit so we can take I'll say a baby step. I won't say an infant step, but a baby step from where that place would be at the end, once this budget is implemented, to where we would be able to go to phase 2. But, to Clay's point, if the goal is phase 2, keep that in mind. And what's the best way to get from where we are to where that is? It's just the issue of the jump, as you said, Helen. I think that's where, the budget committee is well established and well placed to be able to say, we want a big jump, we don't want a big jump. We want to be able to plan for it, or we'll put it in reserve, and that's the way we'll plan for it. I mean, there's different ways to get there.
Yeah, I guess in my head too, a lot of this is, less of this is necessarily revolved around a firefighter, and more of this is revolved around an EMT.
Mhm.
With that being said, do we need another firefighter during the day? Not really. Well, I mean, this is completely opinion based. Do we need
Well-
another specific firefighter during the day? Maybe not. Would it be nice to have an EMT during the day? Of course,
Mhm.
absolutely.
To that point,
But what,
isn't our harbor master an EMT basic? Or what level of EMT are you looking at for this position?
So Abby would need additional certification to be able to serve as a EMT for us. I've talked to her about it, and she's considering it, but I think she would be more of the break glass in case of emergency type of help, as opposed to someone who would be on staff or on shift. But we talked about, that's an ongoing conversation, I think, with Abby and I. I'd love to be able to see her help out in some way, and I think she'd love to be able to help in some way in fixing that EMT issue, like Clay's talking about.
I think I guess in my head where we're going, if we're trying to better round our EMT side of things, and basically the idea is that Northeast is not going to be able to sustain, then we're more effectively trying to replace Northeast and less trying to replace our firefighters. So if we're going to go after that mission, then I say next year we just go right after it. And this year we ride out a contract that we already have sustained. And if there's an emergency in the meantime, we somewhat have backup plans of adjoining towns to get us through in a bind until that we can get our own setup. I mean, if Northeast just leaves right now, even if we had one firefighter and one EMT, we are not sitting well.
Right.
So does that one firefighter and one EMT solve that problem? No. Would two would get us a lot closer. Or I should say four. Would four, two on at a time.
So would you be in favor of putting the full amount back in on that line?
No, I would be
No.
in favor of just pulling it all out. We don't need two additional firefighters, or 1.5.
But could go with the full 5 in phase 2 next
Yeah.
year.
Right.
Yikes.
With that being said, though, what I'd like to see is that we use less of the unassigned fund balance this year so that it puts our reserve up a bit and prepares us for the cost dampening next year use of the unassigned fund balance, so that we can bring all these firefighter EMTs on with less specific blow to the taxpayer. But I mean, if no one else wants to support it, there's not even a sense of making a motion, so it doesn't seem like too many other people are even.
I
Even
think this is something that really needs to be discussed amongst the residents. It's, like I said, I think that the shock of the increased salaries this year, the bond for the new West Rockport, and then you hire 5. I think it's going to be too much without further discussion. I would rather leave it the way the select board did it.
Let her rip. Okay. So any other discussions on fire department as a whole?
I'll just say in closing, I think this is a really, worthy conversation. I probably don't know enough about it to really weigh in effectively. I'm going to fully admit that I was not present at the meeting where the topic was discussed. It sounds like there's a lot here that we need to think about for future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where I was going with it, is there's, I think, more here than really just trying to piecemeal this through budget by budget, year after year is built on. I mean, I think realistically, the taxpayer should be voting on if we want an ambulance service or not.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree, and to the extent it doesn't go through in June, I mean, I would suggest that maybe we revisit this plan, because like you said, there's not going to be a phase 2. Why do a phase 1?
Well, I think we've
Depends
heard
on
that
you, John.
phase one is needed. We do need the EMTs, even if, we don't get, even if Northwest Eastern or whatever they're called sticks around. Just my opinion.
Well, as someone who has spent some time inside of a ambulance on the way to 2 different hospitals, I certainly think we need to have a contingency for what happens if and when Northeast pulls out prior to the end of their contract. But apparently I was asking a question and didn't realize that I was on mute, so I was flapping my gums. John, the question I had for you a minute ago was, what's the offset of funding? I presume that if all of a sudden Northeast says, we're out of here tomorrow, we just can't make it happen.
Yeah.
That we pay them a monthly, we chop our payments to them into months or quarterly billing. What's left over from that to then do something on the immediate side?
Very, very little. I mean, the entire budget to fund Northeast is barely $100,000. That wouldn't even cover one of these positions. So, we would have to go back to, we would have to have a special town meeting. Some of you saw that, St. George had a special town meeting to effectively take over their ambulance service. I mean, we would be in that world. They were moving $73,000 to do it. We'd have to add a 0 to that on the wrong side to be able to jump into phase 2 or whatever that might be. So, I think St. George won't be the last town to do that. There's going to be a lot of towns who are going to be forced in a moment's notice to take quick action to keep and preserve EMS service. Sad to say, as well-meaning and well-intentioned as everyone I think is, even those who operate those services, it's a harsh reality running them. And I think the people that run Northeast are doing their very best I think they are doing their best to try to operate the service and provide quality care to our residents. But, financial picture that they're facing is very challenging. And that has nothing to do with their desires. It's just costs a lot to hire medics and gas and purchasing, equipment and vehicles. It's a hard world to live in. So that's why it's not a profit center. That's why it's a government service, because it doesn't operate at a profit by and large. So that's why we're going to end up in this scenario sooner or later. It's like I said, how big a leap do we take to get there, and how many steps does it take?
Okay.
But do you want a motion?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll make a motion to remove the 1.5 additional firefighter positions from this year's budget. Any seconds?
I'll second it in order to call the vote.
Okay,
Any other discussion on the motion?
what's that?
The next question you would ordinarily ask is any discussion on the motion, and then you go to vote.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? And we'll go to a vote. All right, Helen, how do you say? How do you vote?
No,
Janet? You still on? Bueller? Janet? Okay, we'll skip
Shows is
over
on. She might have lost her connection, but
Hmm.
Jeff.
Jeff, no.
Diana,
No.
Ben,
Abstain. I don't have enough information.
Greg,
No,
me, yes. Okay, motion does not succeed.
And I do want to thank you for your considerably important and experienced perspective on this.
Boy,
You held us with rapt attention for 20 minutes on that.
yeah, too long is what you're saying.
No.
No, it's good discussion.
Yeah, okay, so nothing
Great.
else on the fire department, just double checking, anything else on the fire department budget?
So in essence, whereas that vote looked at a change that we would recommend, with no other vote, we are telling the select board that we support their 1.5 way,
I would agree with that.
just to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to,
So Clay, is it possible we can discuss the $20,000 addition for the bathrooms?
yeah, I think that'll be coming up in,
That's Harbor, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Harbor. It just, I know we've been had this for almost 2 hours, so I have to drop off soon, so I was hoping to get to that if possible.
yeah. Well, I don't think we're too far away at this rate.
Oh,
Day and a half.
yeah,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, is that necessarily more or less important than any other of the
well,
departments?
it's
Let's
a
just keep
change, it's a
moving.
change,
Let's-
right?
Yeah,
Hold on a
let's
second.
keep moving.
It's a change, with all respect, it's a change from the select board, right?
Yes.
Right.
And that was the original intent of this meeting, which I didn't know what the real agenda for this meeting was. So now we're voting, but it'd be nice to see what that $20,000 addition is that the select board has added. I mean, wasn't that the agenda, or am I
I mean, I
misinterpreting?
think a lot of it is to also go over any other changes that the budget committee would like to see. The budget committee that itself has not necessarily had commentary on any department yet. We did question when we were in person with the budget presentations, but we haven't actually given any necessary dialect on any particular line items in any other department either.
But this matter came up after those meetings anyway, so it does make sense to go hit the things that change first, even if it takes us out of order. I think that makes sense.
Sure, let's just go do it then. What
Alright,
page
thank
is
you.
that on?
29,
What page?
229 for the, and 227, well, 227 if you, the heading, the budget itself is on 229.
Oh, all right. So it was just a couple departments away from where we were headed.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Gotcha.
the item in question is on page 230. The 3 changes that they made
Right.
are on
So the
230.
233?
230 and 231 are the pages that have the changes on them.
All right, thank you.
So the public bathrooms, that was a conversation point in the harbor committee, the harbor department review. And a number of you were able to be there. The sense was from the board is that, if we could put in at least half that amount, use that as the opportunity to get as much of those 20 of as much done as humanly possible. The hope was that if we're buying this, if we have purchasing supplies and our buildings and grounds department is able to do the bulk of the work, we may be able to get, if not all of it, the vast majority of what the hopeful goal was in the end, which was to renovate those public bathrooms so that they are, I think Diana kind of talked about this, how it's, it's kind of our welcome mat, there's, And this is a big part of what welcomes people to Rockport. So the 20,000 was really to stand as seed money, I guess, towards that project. If it wasn't completed, we'd seek funds potentially in a future year, but really the hope was to get as much of that accomplished in this budget. Concurrently with that, there was also concern about the washer and dryer. And I think we got into that, if I remember correctly, but the current washer and dryer are probably the original when the building was built. And so the thought was to purchase a coin operated washer and dryer rather than to work with a nearby laundromat who was servicing and keeping the funds. So we would buy our own washer and dryer, and then we increased the revenue. The board did from to $600 in the revenue side. So that's a net increase of that budget. But I think it was reflective of hearing some of the concerns and conversation that the budget committee and the select board had when that harbor budget came up last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry. So that's why that part was added.
Are
Those
the
are-
washer and dryer something that can be serviced by our buildings and grounds or any other personnel in the town?
I don't see why not.
I guess I'm just wondering, are we gonna have to add in a maintenance line also for?
Yeah, I mean, for example, our coin operated shower is something we've been maintaining ourselves as well. So I don't see why we couldn't. I mean, modern washers and dryers, it's more computer parts than it is actual mechanical.
Sure.
But I think I have a lot of faith in Matt and Glenn to be able to handle those projects. So I don't see why not. I think we could go without, certainly with a new washer and dryer too. You'd think you'd have fewer issues.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, obviously, I think these are two great line items. They're things that we did discuss in our previous two budget meetings. I think they make a lot of sense. I mean, the fact that we're paying somebody else to take care of the washer and dryer now, and then they're taking the revenue away and they need to be replaced anyway, to me, that just seems to be something we should absolutely do, right? It can generate income for us. And then, yes, John, I know, and thank you. I appreciate you reiterating that fixing the urinals and the toilets, right? It's our welcome mat, and we don't want to have pee on our welcome mat. So I think those are, that's like when we talk about the face of the town and having something that we can talk about that we're investing back in the community. I think these are two really good line items.
I totally support them being added back in. I actually think that the revenue is probably estimated low and that we're going to find out the revenue will be much higher. If Weymouth was giving us what, $300,
Yeah.
he
Yeah,
was
I think
making a whole lot more
Yeah.
than $600 because he wasn't giving us half of it. So I think that it'll actually turn out better than what we have in the budget.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on the bathrooms? Do we want to make anyone have a motion on the bathrooms or need any more information?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, anything else as the harbor as a whole since we're here?
I'm sorry, did we decide that our no vote, our lack of a vote indicates support for that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything else in harbor? Okay. Do we want to scoot to the library since we're going over all the changes, or do we want to go back to order, or what do we have for people's time needs?
If you don't mind,
I have to wrap up pretty quickly, so I don't know where that puts everybody else, but
Okay,
let's go to changes.
okay, so library is
Culture.
page 265. Any other changes in library?
So this is a pretty simple change, and this was also discussed when the board met with the budget committee. There is the line item, I'm trying to find it here, I'm trying to get the number. And Megan, you can scroll down and find it if you do before I do, but effectively there was the all elevator maintenance, and we budgeted, we'd spent in that line the actual permitting of using the elevator. So unfortunately we had, instead of the 1,400, which is the maintenance contract, there's another $285 that we'd spent. So the board made the change to just include that in the elevator maintenance. So go 14 to 1685. That's all the changes.
Okay. Anything else in the library? That's right here. Okay. I think that was the end of the list of changes.
Yep.
Do we want to go back to Public Works and continue on? Are we gonna still have a quorum after that?
I think, yeah, did you want to go public safety, other public safety? That was the next one in order, Clay.
Yeah, other public
Okay.
safety, 407, page 215.
Okay.
Not really a whole lot to talk about there, I don't think, but
No.
any questions?
No,
Okay,
No,
animal control,
I'm good.
no, not much there.
harbor, we already did harbor.
Mhm.
Emergency management, Department 440, page 237.
I'm good.
Okay. Now to Public Works.
The one question I had in Public Works was the purchase of the backhoe,
Mhm.
which if I recall was what, 200,000? And I know there was debate on, do we really need that if we're spending, 10 to 20,000 a year now? It didn't seem like that made a lot of sense to purchase,
Mhm.
which might help us with some of the budget for the items that we just talked about funding.
What line is that?
I don't know, I'm looking for it now. I can't recall. I wrote
It's
it down.
in 7260. It's the 2024 excavator, and John had already taken it out of his budget, and the select board left it out. So
Okay,
it's not.
perfect. So it's a non-issue. Thank you.
And that's where, just I guess to also visit on that, that's where John had put some money, more money in for rental to cover that. To
Right.
to make up for not purchasing.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
So I do have to drop that. I don't have any other notes. Those were all of my questions. Is that going to impact things if I drop? Are you guys going to be okay or?
We'll still have 5 people as long as everybody else stays. 1, 2.
No one
3.
else is allowed to lose power.
I'm
Sorry.
gonna pull the plug to make it look like I lost power.
All right,
All
thank
right.
you.
Anything else on Public Works? Okay. So next is sanitation, 501, page 257. I don't think there's a whole lot there, right?
No, not much you can really do with this.
On drugs.
And the whole different options for our sewage treatment plant and all that are outside of our budget.
Right,
Okay,
that's right.
all right, moving on. Culture and recreation, let's go with the libraries, did that. Conservation Commission, page 273, Commission, 273.
One thing that came up as a question when you all met about the travel expenses. And remember that Bob Kennedy from the Conservation Commission weighed in and said the travel expenses that are now part of 4135. So there's no additional monies needed. So the board was content with that and moved forward with the budget as presented.
Okay. All right, moving along from there. Parks 603, page 279. Any questions on parks? Park benches, signs, nothing. Okay, moving on. Opera House. Opera House. What, did we end up getting something on the schedule for the select board to discuss that?
You're
John,
muted.
Sorry. They talked about it last night. We still don't have the information from the insurance company and the sprinkler folks. So it was sort of more of an update in public. So the rest of not everyone who isn't watching these meetings with like really intense curiosity, to sort of let everyone else know in the community what's going on. But yeah, they didn't make any decisions. There was some comment about the fact that, this budget, might look differently depending upon how, how some of those details come down from those studies. So, there's a potential that you may need to meet on April 4th to hear some change to this part of the budget, but that I don't know if that speaks for the entire board or part of the board, but it was sort of we still need more information. But in terms of a status quo, this is what we're doing. There weren't any questions or concerns raised that night. They were fine with sort of passing it on as is.
Okay.
But knowing there's more
Reinforcing
conversation to be
speed.
had.
Sure. So any specific questions about the Opera House budget?
Yeah,
Is
John,
it-
what are the capital improvements? They're probably different now.
You're not kidding, right? I'm trying to, Megan, I don't have it in front of me. So what did we have?
So, like the building improvement reserve, that 7205, that was for to paint the auditorium area. At this point, I think that that's money that's gonna have to go into covering things that the insurance company won't.
And we don't think we're fully insured then.
Well, we're fully insured for what they're saying, the water damaged. It's the other damage that we've uncovered since we ripped up the water damage that we're not sure if they're gonna cover or not.
In terms of the audio-visual equipment, I know they moved it from the library or from the Opera House to the library, and then we had the leak in the library. So what insurance is covering what? From where?
So the insurance company is gonna cover all the AV equipment that was damaged. They knew I had changed our coverage from the Opera House to the library when we moved the equipment to the library. So they're gonna cover that AV equipment because I had put it under the library umbrella. So that will be covered. The money that's in here for the audio video stuff is really for the auditorium area and to increase our options upstairs. We've really run into a problem with being able to rent the facility to larger events because some of our equipment maybe isn't necessarily what they need to operate. So that investment would more than offset itself in terms of additional rentals.
And Megan, I don't know if you can tell, but the screen is sort of black with. It's not coming.
I've lost power here in some parts of my house, apparently. My husband's trying to fix it. So once he gets that fixed, then we might be ready to go. But right now, I only have power in part of the house. So
Got it. Okay. I just wanted you to know that that's what that's what we're looking at. So
yeah.
do you want me to unshare? Because I can.
Yeah. Go ahead. and
Yeah,
share.
I can do that.
Okay.
And I'll just take notes, paper form until we can get it fixed.
All right.
Okay. Is there anything else on the Opera House? All right, let's move right along. Recreation.
Yep.
Page 293. Any questions on recreation? Okay, doesn't seem like there's anything on recreation. So we'll move on. Municipal buildings and grounds, administration 701, page 301. Anything in admin? No, I don't. I'm just making sure my audio's still working. Anyone got any info, any input?
It's working. We hear you.
Wait, there you
Good, good. Okay, nothing on administration then. In buildings and grounds. All right, moving on to municipal building, town office, page 309. Anything big there? Okay, not hearing too much, so we will move on to public safety building, page 313. And this, I mean, the public safety building was kind of brought up in the capital improvement plan, right? As maybe something Randy thought might need to be addressed down the road.
Yeah.
Is this, I guess my only, maybe not only concern, but should we be having more of a reserve for this building? Should we be saving up for something now? I mean, maybe now isn't the time to save, especially considering the rest of the budget, but
Yes. I mean, that right. It's always a good time to save, right? It's always
Sure.
a good time to save for, and we know those needs are coming. There will be
Yes,
some
sir.
retrofitting to that building if the West Rockport Fire Station's approved. If that happens, there'll be some work that'll need to be done to the public safety building, presumably to, retrofit to a different use. Potentially, partially different use.
yeah, right.
But
Okay.
yeah, I think you're right. I think it does need that. My thought was next year would be a good year to start to build that up or to build that plan. Once we
Okay.
start to define future.
Presumably that stays, regardless of whether there's a set aside or not, that building stays as it is until the West Rockport is finished. And what's the start to finish? Not necessarily when do we do it, but is the West Rockport a 6-month project or an 18-month?
I think the hope is that we would be open in let's see, 24. Potentially 25, but late 24.
So 2 years from the vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope would be that they would start this summer, early fall. Of course, contracts and all that, but that's the anticipated start date that we've given the bidders. So it's there's at least 2 seasons this season and probably one more that we need to budget for this building to be as is. And that's maybe being a bit conservative, but just building projects don't ever take the time we expect them to. So
Amen. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And the thought is that we can sustain that with this building as is with a budget.
For now, yeah, for now. But I think you're right, Clay. There's something, what form does that take?
Is that big enough that it's a bond issue? Or is it cash?
When we open bids on the fire station, I might say it's a giant bond issue.
Yeah,
I mean, just the cost per square foot right now is just through the roof, so it's hard to judge.
Yeah.
I mean, there will always be a fire presence needed in the village because of ISO ratings and the like. So there will always be a fire presence in that building, or whatever that becomes. So, but obviously, as some of that moves to West Rockport and that new building, that opens up opportunities for the police side, and we have needs there. We have locker room and clean, all those pieces need to happen as well. So I think we can wait a year in terms of the budget. I think we can wait a year to sharpen our focus in that area, but it like the town office, we're going to have a conversation sooner than later about what that looks like. And it could be a bond. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think we're not going to remake the look of it and the feel of it.
Doesn't rise to that level
Yeah. I'm hoping.
yet. So
All right. So anything else in the public safety building? Okay, moving on, West Rockport Fire Station. Anything within the budget at least? Any comments or concerns on 321?
There's a hole in the wall that needs to get cut, I think. That have
Only a hole there if you see it.
Okay.
All right.
missed that reference, but
No, it was
never mind.
just a solid. Help us out with trying to prepare our bidders for what's in the walls there. So thank you, Clay.
Why here? Let me show you.
All right, moving on. The library building. We can just skip over that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Long-term debt. Sorry, next.
Okay.
And again, board went along with what we talked about. This is just some money in here for short-term borrowing with a bond anticipation note. Given or pending the timing of when the gift for RES comes through, that obviously would limit our need to borrow, especially off the bat. So that comes into play here a bit, but we're not banking on this, so we're putting money aside just in case.
I had a quick question on that gift. I
Mhm.
understand that most of it is for RES, but
Mhm.
there's also $1 million floating around there.
Yeah, that's right.
Could that be applied to the Opera House repairs?
Well, the board's conversation has really surrounded the needs for the West Rockport Fire Station, and that was apparent at the time we were discussing this. We didn't know how deep the issues went with the Opera House, so without having discussed that with the donor and the Lester family, I don't know how that fits. obviously it's a major capital expense, so it qualifies as an issue, but our hope at that point, when we were, late December and through January, our hopes were that so much of this would be covered by insurance, but of course the issue has gotten so much deeper. So I think the first thing we're trying to do is get a sense of how deep the hole that we're in at the Opera House is. And before we sort of even consider any other alternatives or how to fill that hole back in. Or is that even a hole we want to fill in? So
Maybe the Lesser family wants an Opera House too.
But there's a lot to be, still decided on that side of things, Helen, but I think, I think it falls within the spirit of the gift, from my perspective, but, as I said, the board was really focused on, we know we're going to do the fire station is going to be a priority. And we heard from our architect and engineer last night, the cost estimates that we had 2 years ago are 2-year-old numbers. And just like everything else that's 2 years old in terms of cost, it's not that same price any longer. So we need to be prepared for what those bids could be. This gift may be, a big help to be able to say, well, it's a big cost, but we have this gift to offset some of that, which doesn't say anything of the Opera House, but those are real concerns as well. So.
Okay, anything else on long-term debt? Okay. County, 343. Not really much we can do outside of the handcuffs there.
Yep.
All other cemeteries,
Mhm.
351.
I have a concern about we're kicking the columbarium down the road again, and that is a revenue line when it's built. And the costs are just going up and up and up to have it built. So is there any way, I mean, you said something about a trust fund.
Mhm.
Can you explain how are we going to be able to move forward and having a columbarium in the next year or 2 years?
We can, yes, we can. I think the next step in that process is set prices and start to advertise and gain interest. So what Augusta and a number of communities who have done the columbariums have effectively started waiting lists. And once they've sold 25% of those, niches, they would then purchase the columbarium. So that's sort of the next step, but that means we have to set a price per niche. And that, as you know, kind of goes hand in hand with, well, then what are the grave prices, and what's so it's sort of, we can't just deal with the columbarium, we have to deal with all of those sort of the smorgasbord of different options, so that way one isn't outsized from the other.
Right.
So in part, I'm trying to let Liz get her feet wet in this world.
Quite literally there too.
Quite literally, unfortunately, at Seaview, yeah. And and in fact, Linda is still working on a number of different projects that she had taken home to organize. So the hope is that we could, once the sort of the new car smell for Liz is worn off, then she can jump into the cemeteries. It's always the last thing for a new clerk to sort of figure out, because it's so deep, right? You have to have that historical knowledge, backed by how does policy work? How do we do this? How do we do that? And I think I'm thinking this summer we'll be able to jump in head first into, remember we were talking about changes to the rules, updating the rule book, and taking a new look at those those lot prices. So I,
Well, the cemetery committee, yeah, the cemetery committee made a huge number of changes
Mhm.
2 years ago, and they were never presented to the select board. I don't know why.
Hmm.
But we totally went through line by line, including looking at the lot prices and comparing with other cities. And it just died, and then you closed off the committee. So will the cemetery work group be pulling up looking at what the cemetery committee did in terms of all those changes?
Yeah, I've never seen that, Helen, to be honest with you. That's actually the first I've heard that there was sort of a major review and lot
Oh.
changes and prices.
Before
So
COVID.
yeah, if you have, I mean, obviously, we may well look at prices sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID, you know, I have no doubt that there are changes there, but if you have something that from your last effort there, feel free to send them over, because that's a new one for me. So I'd rather
was
not
very
reinvent the
frustrating.
wheel. If we've already reinvented the wheel, let's not reinvent it again.
Yeah, I've got, it's in paper. I don't know if Linda has the digital copy of all the changes that were made.
Hmm.
But it was at least, well, it's now 3 years since COVID started.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
far.
and this was before that.
Okay.
And I don't know why it never went to the select board.
Yeah. No, and I hadn't heard that either. So
Mhm.
we'll get it going. I mean,
Okay.
it's a good idea. It makes a lot of sense. You know, but perhaps some of the work we're doing can prep, you know, in terms of the area. There's a lot of earthwork that's going to need to be done to prep for the columbarium. So
Yeah, we have a place for it. We picked out a place for it.
okay,
So-
yeah, that's fantastic. That's yeah. I
And the
yeah, I don't
design
think
and
there's-
everything.
the hesitance on my part to do it isn't so much that I don't think it's a good idea. I do think it's a good idea. I think it's been more of there's all these other factors that have sort of stood in the way that we have to sort of look at all of it all at once. But if some of that's been done, beautiful,
Mhm.
makes it easier. So
Hey, Clay,
Yeah,
I have about 15 more minutes.
okay.
FYI.
I think this might be the last department, isn't it? No, we have schools.
yeah,
Which we
Anything
can't do
else on
anything about anyway.
cemeteries? Cemeteries going once. Sold. Schools. 357, anything. Before we lose our quorum. Special assessments. 361. Okay. That's our budget.
that's the budget.
So I think the next steps are to present the select board with the letter of intent or a letter. And then go from there. See how they react to that on the 3rd.
If
Okay.
we'll try to, if we expect that there'll be something pressing on the 3rd, and especially in terms of, let's say, the Opera House budget, we'll let you all know. To be prepared for a meeting on the 4th, if that looks possible. I don't know, you know, we're too far out at this point, but you know, let's hope everything's goes swimmingly, and insurance wants to pay for everything in a brand new Opera House. That'd be nice. But I thank you all for going through this exercise, and you know, it's not an easy budget, and I appreciate you taking the time to try to, you know, peel through it all and offer your thoughts, whatever, from wherever they come from. It makes a better product. So thank you.
Okay.
John,
Thank you.
I have a quick question that I'll wrap up in budget committee lingo. In order to get a good representation of people throughout the town on voting for this and getting them informed and what have you, do you have any feeling at this point what sites well, let me back that up. You have any idea in your mind whether it's possible to have the Opera House ready by June annual meeting? And if not, what are your thoughts about, or what are you thinking about alternate places, both for the paper voting and for the annual meeting?
Right, so the
Town
board
meeting.
is, I'm glad you brought that up. So the board is taking steps to have the warrant drafted as if the budget will be decided by secret ballot and not on the floor of town meeting. So that would obviously change the conversation. It would raise the priority of the public hearing, which will occur at the select board meeting in May, to hear on the items on the budget and everything else that will be decided by secret ballot. That decision, they've decided to have the articles drafted. They'll decide at their meeting on the 10th, if that's the method of voting. The election is something that will need to be addressed. The Richardson room is available, but I'm remain concerned about the disruption to the rest of the staff as everyone kind of peels through there during the day. And secondly, not a lot of room. So there are other alternative sources, including the old place where we used to vote, which was the fire station, the public safety building. So that's those are options to consider. But but nothing's been decided at present. That needs to be decided fairly soon, though.
What about the lower level of the library?
Well, that's another thought too, Helen. When I raised that idea, and it is well set up for that conversation, the next thing I hear about is, well, what about parking? So
You have that problem with the Opera House.
right,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
exact same.
So I think we could pull it off, and I think it could work. I'd like to try it, see what happens. But I'm going to talk to Liz. I'm going to go with my town clerk's intuition on what the best option is available, and work from there. But I will say we met. I'm not sure. Jeff obviously was there, but we met. The board met there in the Rockport room last night. The select board, and it was a great room. It really served its purpose well. I think it was a nice change of pace, if nothing else, although we would prefer to have a Jeff Parker room in working order. But the Rockport room definitely served its purpose, and it was a kind of a nice space for a meeting like that. So hopefully we can do that again. And all of our board and committee meetings of importance will be held in the Rockport room, until we can figure out the next steps at the Opera House. So there's a lot of questions that go, a lot of things that still need to be worked out, but I think we are headed in a very different direction than we've had in the years past. And so that will require education of our public to let them know, hey, we've always done it this way. And I realize always is 72 people showing up to vote at the Opera House, but instead everyone's going to vote on the budget when they show up to the polls in June. And if that's the way the select board goes, we should have a bigger sense of how does the community feel about the general direction of town services. So,
And would the vote, the secret ballot vote, break up into the departments and into things where it's not just a one and done, but you could express your support for X and your refusal of
we'd do it. We'd break it up the same way.
the same way we have the article.
Right.
So
Megan has them. There's multiple departments within categories, and so we would maintain those same categories just as we had for years on the in-person annual town meeting. It would just be that would be the vote for. It's just, it'd be a checkbox for that department, or excuse me, that category of departments.
So they would see that the select board voted yes on everything, and the budget committee voted for and 2 against it or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So if the category, like, if the category was, for example, I'm trying to bring up what we call them, but cultural and recreation, right? The cultural and recreation budget, which includes library, conservation, all these different, these budgets for, these are the line items for these budgets for those departments. Recommendation, budget committee, recommendation, select board, and then vote yes, vote no.
But they would be voting for the Opera House, for the library, for the recreation
Right.
separately. Okay.
No, they would all
No.
be in one, just as they have been.
Oh,
So the way we've done it in the past is culture and rec is culture and rec. So all of the items within culture and rec would be voted on.
oh, that's right. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Just
you may
gonna-
have discussions, you may have discussions about black cats, I mean, about parts of that part. But the only options at annual town meeting are to approve, disapprove, or vote to lower the amount of money. You can't vote to make more.
Right. I
or
lost your
out-
picture. I'm not sure how to get it back.
We got
So-
you.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you. Samantha stepped on something and I'm not sure what. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. This is why I have to call my son sometimes to figure out how to run this thing. And I'm doing it on Bill's computer, so
I noticed that, yeah.
yeah, and I don't know how to change that. I'm sure I'll have Nate change it for me though. So I certainly don't look like Bill.
That's probably a good thing. On that note.
Yes, good Lord, it's 8:30. Let's. Yeah,
I make a motion to get the heck out of town.
sounds good to me.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Hopefully
good
you
night,
guys
y'all.
can maintain power for the rest of the night. We're full.